Life can bring us down, but turn it all around.
Hello, my name is Jonathan, otherwise known as Exwitnessawake, and I want to welcome you to the Apostate Coalition YouTube page. If you've been following my content in the past, you've noticed that I've had some Apostate Coalition stuff on my page, but we finally have its own home. So today, Zem and Dr. TimeWaster, Jane, and myself are going to have a discussion regarding the mental health of Jehovah's Witnesses and ex-Jehovah's Witnesses and the impact that the cult has on people. So the reason we're doing this is because recently the suicide hotline has been changed to 988. So instead of a 10-digit number, we now have a 3-digit number. It will be much easier to remember in the event that you or another person needs to use it. It's still a 10-digit number in Canada. I happen to live in Ontario, so I've placed that on the bottom of the screen. So, how are you both today?
Good. Yeah. Excited to be here.
Yep.
Excited for the new channel. All good things to come.
Absolutely.
Yep. I'm
Hopefully,
excited to talk about a
we'll
lot
do
of
it some
stuff
justice.
here.
Yes. So, it's a known fact that among Jehovah's Witnesses, the instances of suicide are approximately 5 to 10 times that of the general public. There's been a lot of studies, a lot of people have got statistics together, and that seems to be the general consensus that, unfortunately, that many people are affected by depression, anxiety, and so on. And we've lost a lot of people, and we're quite sad about that. So it just seemed appropriate, considering the new number for the suicide hotline, to talk about how we have been affected and how others in the organization have been affected. So did anyone want to begin with an experience or?
Whew, I thought you were going to say a prayer or a song or
No,
something.
No hymns today.
Well, I mean, I did a little bit of research as well. I tried to look up some statistics. I tried to look at some unbiased, not that we're biased, but some unbiased studies in just trying to look at religions overall and see if there's any trends in suicide for any particular religion. And there are some really interesting articles that did pop up. It turns out the Muslim religion does seem to have a lot of trends in suicide as well. But one of the things that I noticed when I was looking in those trends was that really it's going to be very challenging to collect any accurate data to find out what are causing people to commit suicide. And how much their religions might play a role in that, because one, not all of the statistics and the data that they gather even has what religion a patient or person might be.
Mm-hmm.
And so really it would be up to maybe the individual religions to maybe keep track of that kind of thing if they knew how many of their parishioners or their members were committing suicide. And of course, I don't know any religion that's probably going to actually track or release any kind of data along those lines.
They're probably not too proud of that statistic, whatever it might be.
Right. And there's a lot of not cloud, but like it's a little muddy, the data, in terms of how they're collecting it to find some of these research articles and that, to come up with the statistics. Mostly just because several of the studies that I was looking into, a lot of them are like meta-analyses where they kind of pull in a lot of research that's already been done and then kind of pool it together to kind of compare each of the studies' results and conclusions. And one of the things that even in some of the meta-analysis that I read was that they were excluding spiritualistic things such as demonic possession claims and things like that. So they weren't counting that as religiously affiliated. So a lot of these statistics are going to be very challenging to really pin down, because the how they collect the data and what they're looking at as inclusion or exclusion criteria for their study could very well exclude very important data that would very much lead people to claim that the religion was what led them down that path. And especially the part that I read where they had excluded out demonic possession claims and things like that, because I know for a fact Jehovah's Witnesses have claimed that a lot, or that they have been, because they believe that demonic possession can be real, whether it is a person or an object that has been mysteriously possessed by a demon and then they happen to pick it up or bring it into their home. I've heard a lot of people blame some pretty horrific things that they've done, some criminal activity, and blamed it on that. And so I could very easily see how a person could get very terrified that they've been possessed and kill themselves. So I guess my point that I'm making here is that it is going to be very challenging to really pin it down. And a lot of religions are very good at obscuring there's a word I'm trying to say, I can't say it. But clouding the issue. Yes, thank you. Clouding the issue and redirecting and gaslighting everyone that they have anything to do with it. So those are my concerns.
I'll take that even a step further and say that not only do they obfuscate the data, they manipulate it after the fact, because how many times have you heard somebody say, oh, they weren't a real witness, they didn't count. And, you know, there are groups of elders' wives, as it were, that take it upon themselves to reach out to different groups and say, hey, this person wasn't really a witness, and they do it so that the congregation looks better. And, you know, how many of those are taken as truth and how many are ignored and the statistics are still there, you know, I can't say. But I can tell you at least one person I know would actually make phone calls. Used to know, would actually make phone calls after things like suicide, and they would bring up the state whatever group and say, hey, just to let you know, I've heard that you were told this person was a Jehovah's Witness. They weren't. Jehovah's Witnesses don't commit suicide. And they would do everything in their power to get that, just scrub from the books altogether. So even whenever a person who was a baptized witness does do that, we'll talk about some other things, of course, but one of the things I've noticed is they just completely shut them down, just as if they never existed in the first place.
And how much data has, as you say, been skewed or completely ignored in the name of making it look better for the organization that they're part of?
Which is really saying something, because from the brief numbers that we are able to show up, it doesn't look good on them as it is. And whenever you take into account that we know this is happening, it's just that much worse. Paints a bad picture in a much worse light.
So I have my own little notes.
Oh, nice.
And I kind of wrote down my own personal understanding of the reasons why people commit suicide. So here's the list I have so far. And this is what I was taking notes on because I added something to the list. Okay. So this is just me coming off the top of my head. So poverty and low socioeconomic status. The reason I'm putting that out there is because life is a lot harder when you don't have money and resources. I wrote pain, and then in parentheses, I wrote unbearable pain. Yeah. And in all honesty, that's a very large part, I think, of a lot of people, if not all people who commit suicide. Feelings of worthlessness and being a burden upon others. And then the thing that I just wrote, because you said something made me think about it, is just not being accepted in society, period. Just, a lot of the reasons why people feel ostracized and that they should end their lives is that nobody wants them around. They don't fit in. And if we removed that barrier, a lot of people probably wouldn't feel the need to dramatically change everything about themselves or pretend to be something that they're not, and then miserable and continue to be miserable. Mm-hmm. And then maybe eventually just decide that it's not worth it anymore and that their only out is to die. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we can go a lot with just those items of how religion and the Jehovah's Witness organization specifically and cults specifically would drive people to feel all of these things. In fact, I think Jehovah's Witnesses fit almost a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses, if not all of them, fit at least one or more of those categories.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Like your first one about being the socioeconomical, basically being poor. Education for the most part, menial jobs that are supposed to keep you humble, things like that. Unless you work it out a certain way, you're generally not going to be well off. You're going to probably be living check by check.
Mhm.
That's going to have its own stressors right there.
Mhm.
Unless you're Stephen Lett and you got, or one of the other governing bodies with your Rolexes and your gold rings and that, you're probably not rich.
Yeah.
I don't have the resource to cite here in this, but when I was in school, we went over a couple of studies on poor socioeconomic status and how that adversely affects your health. Mm-hmm. And the research on it is quite profound. In fact, I probably don't even really need to cite it. We could probably just Google it and find it. But that those with low socioeconomic status are going to have poorer health outcomes across the board. They're going to have shorter lifespans. They're going to have more health problems. And within the study that we reviewed in my class, one of the things was that even people who were born into poverty, who then later got out of poverty and were able to not be in that status, still had poorer health than those who were born into better, higher income houses, which really depressed me, of course. But it makes sense. It's very adversely affects people for a long time, their whole lives, possibly.
Yeah, it makes sense because there's two aspects to that. There's the physical, I have money now that I didn't have before, but there's the lingering pattern of you were in this poor situation growing up, so you're going to have latent health issues that you're never had resolved, that you're going to struggle with. But there's also an attitude that comes with not having money of, because we all know this, I'm only going to go to the emergency room if it's absolutely an emergency, because without having proper good health care and health insurance, you're talking thousands of dollars for something that you just would rather suffer for a few weeks and get it over with, even though you know that those couple of weeks here, a couple of days there are going to add up and they're going to really cause you problems later in life. It's just more worth it for you just to say, yeah, but I don't want the $12,000 bill for a 3-hour appointment at the ER.
Yeah.
And even whenever you do come into money, you still sort of have that attitude of other people need it more. It's not worth my time or my money to go into it. And so it definitely sticks with you. Absolutely.
And I think too, like if you're a provider for your family, especially a male, you have a tendency to be like, yeah, but I got to keep working. I can't afford to take the day off to go to the doctor, or, the kids need clothes and food and, I can't afford to go that specialist appointment. But then, 6 months from now, you're in the hospital because you've had a heart attack. It's going to cost you a lot more. But,
yes. The takeaway from this is preventative medicine is a lot cheaper than waiting until you have cancer or a heart attack or something.
And I dare say that that's, generally speaking, more of like an American problem than I think it is in other countries. Europe and other countries tend to have more of a preventative healthcare system in place, whereas the Americans is quite the opposite. But I think all around the world, it's definitely an issue, regardless.
Yep.
I've got a kind of a unique perspective in that because I'm from the U.S. I was born in Indiana and moved to Ontario in my mid 20s. And so I have been to where I can't afford to go to the doctor. I got to pay when I show up to the doctor, a copay or whatever.
Yep.
It's expensive. And then I got here And my wife at the time had to have a surgery, orthoscopic surgery on her shoulder a few months after we got together. And I was just in a panic. I'm like, okay, who do I got to pay? And she's like, nobody, it's free. I'm like,
Right.
I like this.
Yeah.
You know, so it's nice to be in a situation where I didn't have to pay that. So, you know, I guess I'm fortunate in that way because my son had to have open heart surgery and, you know, different things have happened. So if I was living in a different place, you know, that might have ruined us financially.
My aunt and uncle, when I was growing up, they actually lived across the street from me, and that's where we had our book study and everything. But my aunt was born in Canada. I forget where. I want to say Ottawa, but I'm not sure. And when she moved down to the States to marry and live with my uncle, she kept her dual citizenship specifically because as long as she had her citizenship, any type of medical care she needed, she can just go back up and take care of. And sure, it was like a 9-hour drive, but you take a 9-hour drive in the 80s and 90s with the prices of gas at the time and everything, and it's a fraction of what it was, you know, even with hotels and stuff, than going anywhere down here. So there's definitely some benefits to that, you know, for what they were. And it was interesting because they were witnesses. My uncle was an elder until he was literally too mentally unstable to be. As he got older, he got dementia. And so they finally had to take him off of the account of being an elder. But one of the things that they always said was like, we wish that we could just move to Canada altogether and just live there because it's a much better place to be. And that's coming from an elder who's not supposed to care about those material things or those other things. And so
sounded almost political.
It did. It was, boy, that's a conversation for another day. But
Yeah,
politics
sure.
and the witnesses, they pretend to be neutral, but they absolutely are not.
Yeah, that's true. So I think we've well established that one of the reasons that there's higher instances of suicide, depression, anxiety, so on, is because of you know, economic conditions. But what were some of the other things that you had listed?
The other things I had listed were pain, which in all honesty can be physical pain or it can be emotional pain. Sometimes the body really can't differentiate between the two.
That's true.
Pain is subjective, and it's something that no one can tell you don't have. But unfortunately, depending on the kind of pain you have, we don't always have therapies or medications that can really do anything about it.
Right.
That can absolutely be a reason to do it. Now I work in hospice. So obviously I deal with people who are having a lot of physical and emotional pain as they're dealing with and coping with and coming to terms with their own mortality and their terminal illnesses and their families, which probably is the more challenging part. And it's, you know, I also live in a state where they have death with dignity, which is a law that allows people who have a terminal prognosis to be able to qualify to take medication to end their own life whenever they want. And so I have a very unique perspective when it does come to what is considered suicide and ending your life. I have had people in my life who have committed suicide. And obviously I deal with people all the time who die and people who end their own life for comfort and control over a situation they have no control over. And I guess my perspective is I don't always think that suicide is a bad thing. I don't always think that suicide isn't potentially the best case scenario for somebody.
Right.
But it is soul crushing and heartbreaking to know that people who are not actually dying are doing it because they're just in so much misery being alive. And it's not because they have a terminal disease, it's because of all of the other things going on in their life. And maybe they do have, you know, a disorder of sorts that is causing them to be very uncomfortable in life, but they're not anywhere near close to terminal. And obviously I would hope that we would help as a society, that we would help people try every option before they try suicide, because that is the last option you will ever get to do. There are no do-overs. There are no other ideas. That's the last option. And of course, the younger people are, the more heartbreaking it is, because most of the time we know that there were other options that they didn't know were possible. And so speaking of that, I feel like cults and other religions, but Jehovah's Witnesses particularly, do not provide options for people. And they're very, very bad about knowing what kinds of options are available for people, because they're so close-minded about the risk of losing your everlasting soul. And I don't personally believe that that's ethical. So,
well, I can speak to that one directly because I have diagnosed anxiety and depression. I've suffered with it my entire life, but I was diagnosed officially in 2011. And the first thing I did after I was diagnosed with that was I went to the elders and I was like, hey, I'm gonna get into therapy because this is the symptoms. And their immediate response was, okay, sure, but you're not going to run the microphones anymore. You're not going to do the sound. You're not going to be giving any talks. You're not going to be leading the group out in field service. As long as anybody knows that you're going through therapy, we're not going to let you do any of that. So not only do they not provide options for you to get the help that you need, but they actually take them away, and they actively discourage any sort of help. And of course, my first thought was, well, why not? I'm trying to get medicine and help for the issues that I have. And they said that it amounted to two things for them. The first was that they don't believe that depression is anything that can't be cured with prayer and field service. And two, and this is the one that really got me, and actually this was part of what started my fade, was they said that the idea of going to therapy is that it's going to lead to not necessarily demonic possession, but to apostate thinking, to worldly thinking. The idea that you need to go to somebody else to get help for your mental health outside of the Bible and the Watchtower was a problem to them. It was a threat. And so yeah, it's absolutely a problem. And, you know, I ended up doing it anyway for about a year, and then I got off a bit. Things got bad, and I actually was suicidal for a short time. Obviously, I'm still here, so that's good. But because of that, I have a very unique perspective and a very strong sympathy for those who are still in the congregations and in the different cults who are stuck because there's just no way out for them. And they're actively being discouraged by their elders and their peers not to go and seek help, and just and it makes it even worse in a way, because then you're like, okay, I'm not going to go get help for this, and now I'm also blaming myself for having a lack of faith that's causing my depression, because it's not this chemical imbalance that I have, but it's my lack of faith. So they want you to just put your nose to the grindstone even more and go out in field service even more. And at the time, I was pioneering, had been for a year and a half, putting close to 70 hours a month in field service. I was doing 2 to 3 talks a week. I was doing all of the sound stuff. It was like, how much more time and effort could I physically give to them? And yet I still had anxiety and depression that they were blaming me having a lack of faith for. So it didn't make sense. And that's exactly what they wanted, because the more you doubt, the more you're going to get stuck into it. And the more you're stuck into it, the harder it is to get out. So it's
surprise guest.
Welcome in.
Hi guys.
I didn't want to interrupt your flow by popping people on the screen, so I was trying to let you finish your thought.
All good. Welcome in.
I don't know if you were able to hear any of that.
I was, yeah. Sorry, I'm a bit late. So are we talking about therapy specifically?
We haven't really got into the therapy aspect of it yet, but we're kind of alluding to that. As Zem was saying, like, you know, there are some, well, Zem said it.
Yeah, basically, just to recap it shortly, and we can cut this out of the thing. Jane was talking about different reasons why people, especially in the congregations, will commit suicide. And one of the ones that we were talking about was mental health and pain in general. And I was saying that, I have chronic depression and anxiety, medically diagnosed. And first thing I did whenever I was diagnosed, I went to the elders and said, hey, I got this diagnosis. I want to go get help. And they're like, okay, cool. All of your responsibilities in the congregation are going to get cut off until you stop therapy.
Of course.
You don't have depression. You just need to go out and service more. You just need to have more faith and all of that kind of stuff. So
yeah, I had my own a similar experience with marriage counseling, actually, where there wasn't something specifically, it wasn't breaking any rules, but there was clearly that bias, and the elders trying to encourage us to work with them rather than a third-party counselor, or work with each other over issues, when really what we needed was a counselor as a third party. And the culture is just so inherently anti-therapy. And I know witnesses who've gone to therapists and been okay. I think it can vary based on your elder body whether they actually punish you for it, but it still makes you look bad. It makes you look less than exemplary, and it can cause you to get passed up for privileges, or, like in your case, have them taken away.
Oh, hey, I'm not feeling good. I'm sick. Oh, you're sick? Okay, well, we're going to punish you for that. And then we're going to gaslight you.
I will never understand that in a million years.
Why aren't you better? You're not praying hard enough.
I mean, the fact that, like they've said before, that people who commit suicide won't be resurrected because it's a sin. Like, that alone is one of just the cruelest things. Can you imagine first of all, what it does to someone who's considering that, and also what it does to their family? Like, it's just a brutal thing to tell people, and really unconscionable. Can't speak today.
That word.
It's interesting because I actually have on the other screen up, I'm not going to share my screen right now, but I have up an article from December 2014, The Awake. The cover subject was what you should know about mental disorders. Oh. And in their little box at the end, dealing with mental disorders, it's a 9-point checklist basically of what to do. And the first one says, follow the treatment prescribed by qualified mental health professionals.
Well, I'll tell you what.
Mental health professionals. Every time I tried to talk to somebody about a mental health professional around 2014, when this article was released, they told me I couldn't go. So they speak out of both ends of their mouth. On paper, they pretend that they care, but whenever it actually comes to seeking that help, they shut you down. That's the exact right there. Yeah,
that's what I had on my screen.
Exactly.
Like, well, that's interesting.
Actually,
yeah.
Okay.
It's the typical workout, and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
I like how number 7 says limit alcohol consumption and drugs that are not prescribed for you. Not avoid, but limit those drugs. Okay, so some are okay, just don't go overboard. Got it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and let's just be honest here. Somebody telling you to get enough sleep doesn't help you get enough sleep, right? Like if you have depression or an anxiety that is keeping you up at night, and then having somebody tell you, well, maybe you should just exercise and get some more sleep, get better sleep. And how do I do that? How
Stop being depressed.
Yes. Just
I was just going to say, have you tried not being depressed?
Have you tried praying so hard and long that you're bored to tears that you just fall asleep? Maybe that would work.
That actually did work.
That is actually what would get me to go to sleep.
Yeah.
In this article that you were talking about here, I was looking at it because I had it on ready to go. I noticed that it did. I've gone too far now. Let's see here. Treating mental. Okay, so it's showing a doctor, obviously. But treatment may include talking to trained mental health professionals who can help understand the illness. It talks about treatment, but it doesn't say talk to a therapist.
That's true.
It's implying. I mean, what's therapist? Wears the lab coat. So it's obviously from the aspect of pharmacological.
Right. And what it does say there is treatment may include talking to a trained mental health professional, which so there are a lot of charlatans around, as you may have noticed. And some of them are people who do claim to be mental health professionals. But they're not actually licensed in any kind of way. And so these are also people that tend to take advantage of people, and they're not really qualified to help you. So it would have been nicer had they like laid out some actual professionals that would be better to go to. Instead, it is so vague that everyone is left to their own devices yet again to kind of figure out what's right for them, while also basically being gaslit and not being giving any real help or advice. And if you are born and raised in this religion and you have a whole family maybe who have never gone to college or been formally educated or have low socioeconomic status and maybe don't have health insurance, how are you going to know what to do, who to go to, what resources are available to you?
Yeah.
That's it. That's that. So people will just research the Watchtower and they'll find that and just grasp the first thing maybe that they can, the first life raft that floats by, the log. And that's just, there's so much, there's like literally could be a ship over there to save people from drowning, but instead they're gonna be, look, there's a log, you can paddle to it, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I think it's sorry.
No, go ahead. Good.
I think it's interesting that it's a standard part of Jehovah's Witnesses indoctrination techniques and to make you feel like if something is wrong, it's because you're not doing enough. The problem is with you. And it's not just for depression. They do that with almost everything. You know, if you're not making enough spiritual advancement, it's your problem. If you're not getting enough Bible studies, it's your fault. And so that is so ingrained in their teaching techniques that they fall back on that for everything. And culturally, you are trained to look at things through that lens. And so I think a lot of people, when they start suffering from depression, because the advice they're given with everything else in the organization is, oh, you're not doing something right. You just got to do something better and everything will work out for you. It's the default for both the person who's depressed to see things through that lens, and it's the default for the elders who are advising them to see things through that lens and reinforce that. So often, like the thought of even going to therapy, it's not something that occurs to a lot of witnesses because they've been trained to believe that if they don't feel happy, if they don't feel right, it's their fault, and they've just got to work on that.
Yeah.
You're never good enough. You're not doing enough. Is basically the
Well,
thought.
Jehovah's perfect, so if there's something wrong with you, it's your fault.
Yeah. And the other thing that never set right with me was one of the reasons that they said that I should not be reaching out to worldly doctors to get help was because one of the things that they encourage is meditation. That's not biblical meditation. And, you know, as somebody who is now no longer of the faith, no longer in the organization, I understand that all meditation is at its core is just calming yourself down, streamlining your thoughts, allowing yourself to focus, you know, good thoughts in, bad thoughts out. But if you mention meditation to any witness, their mind's going to go to, when we were talking about this earlier, demonic possession.
Yeah.
When you empty your mind, you're opening it up to demons. And that's been printed a number of times. I think it was even in I want to say the Revelation book, there was a reference to it at one point. I know it was in several articles that I read growing up. You don't meditate. You meditate on the scriptures only. And the way that you do that is through prayer.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't even allowed to go home and like feel comfortable just trying to clear my mind because I was sinning and I was opening myself up to demonic possession. It's absolutely ridiculous. And of course, you know, like we're talking about, that made it worse. And that was one of the things that led to me getting in a state where, you know, things could have gone a lot worse than they did. So they have blood on their hands. And I will be very, very vocal about saying that there are elders that in the congregation specifically, and the organization itself absolutely has blood on its hands for a number of reasons, but specifically for pushing their mentally handicapped, mentally unhealthy people to committing suicide. They almost encourage it in a way without actually explicitly saying it.
Mm-hmm.
I think also the tendency for the organization to make people feel trapped can contribute to that. And like for example, if you're in a marriage where you're miserable, what choice do you have other than like lose all your friends and family and deal with public shaming or become worldly, which is something you can't even fathom a lot of times because you lose all your support, or stay trapped in a marriage where you're miserable forever, right? Like there's all kinds of situations like that in the organization where you can be completely stuck and feel trapped and be told there's nothing you can do and there's no way out of it and you have to deal with this situation. Or for example, LGBTQ people are in the same boat, and so like the tendency to box people in and make them feel trapped where there's no option short of losing everyone they care about, that can also drive someone to that state.
That was the last thing on my list that I added, which is not being accepted in society. That as a motive that people have for suicide. And I would certainly think that every single LGBTQ person who's ever been associated with the organization has probably contemplated or thought about suicide.
Yes, we have. Yeah.
And even just the run-of-the-mill Jehovah's Witness or ex-witness or whatever, you can look back, and I'm sure everybody has a sense that they just were on the outs, a little weird, a little different. They just didn't fit in with normal people. You felt awkward in situations. You didn't know what to talk about. It's just that little bit of a sense of tension of like you're just not right. So I can imagine how much more accentuated that would be when you're dealing with, with LGBTQ. That's got to be like times 1,000 or something.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you're made to feel like you're wrong. Like it's wrong to engage in homosexual activities and stuff. So you just need to just squash down yourself and just be false. Just, fake it.
And I don't want to diverge too much from this, but I think it's interesting how when someone is disfellowshipped, I think we can all like look back on this and see that like when someone is disfellowshipped, almost all the witnesses immediately retroactively rewrite the history. We look back and we try to find a reason for how this person could have left. I was trying to explain this to my counselor, and I came up with a pretty decent analogy that if your coworker didn't show up to work one day and you found out he was a pedophile, you would be shocked, and then you would start searching through your memories trying to look for some kind of confirmation that maybe you knew he was, or something that seemed off. So when someone leaves the truth, as they would say, witnesses are shocked. They search their memory. They start exaggerating the smallest stories about them until pretty soon it's like, I always thought something was off with that guy, or I never liked that guy anyway. And almost all of us have done that. I can look back and realize I've done that. And I think knowing that when you leave, everyone's going to talk that way about you. Everyone you've ever cared for, everyone you've ever looked for respect from is going to suddenly act like they never liked you or like you've always been a bad seed. I think that adds an extra layer to that fear of being able to leave, because it's just so much of a weight and a hit.
We care what people think about us, whether we want to or not sometimes. And knowing that people will talk about you behind your back, that's hard. I don't know if this is relevant, but I also noticed that when people would talk about them, you wouldn't really necessarily know why somebody got disfellowshipped. But that was almost worse, because all it did was really make people imagine the most horrible, heinous thing that you could have possibly done. You could have gotten disfellowshipped for the stupidest reason that it had people known about it. They would have been like, what? That's why they got disfellowshipped? But that's not what people are going to think. They're going to imagine that you've committed the worst sins possible.
Mhm.
Well, when was the last time you heard from the convention in one of their persecution? Well, we know what we like to call it. Whenever they're doing their skits or whatever their dramas, I guess they call them.
Dramas, yeah.
When was the last time we heard it was something simple? It's always something somebody got swept up in fornication or adultery or drug use or murder, or the list goes on. And as we're getting further and further into the future, the darker they go. You never hear so and so got disfellowship because they insert lame thing here. And
Because
because that's what we're
The
surrounded
guy they work with offered him
Right.
some chewing tobacco, and they're like, "Yeah, I'll try it," or something.
They decided that they were going to go ahead and sell that naughty magazine that was part of their job whenever they work at the 7-Eleven, and the elders didn't like that, so they got disfellowship. I know somebody that actually happened to. They were disfellowshipped because their job required them to sell the magazines that they keep behind the counter at the gas station, and they did it. And the elders were like, "Nope, you're whatever. You're promoting promiscuity and adultery and pornea," and they listed all the things, and they disfellowshipped them for it. They wouldn't even look at it; they're covered.
What about
But-
selling cigarettes?
Exactly.
It's like
Yeah.
that brother wasn't holding up the video camera to take the pictures of the
Exactly.
of the adult actors. Come on, it's just selling a magazine.
Yeah, so bringing that kind of stuff around, like, if you're trapped in a situation, whether you're LGBTQ or you are in a marriage or that is unfulfilling or miserable, or you're in an abusive household of some sort, and you know that all these things happen to people who leave, that everyone will treat you this way, they'll make assumptions, they will think the worst. Leaving doesn't feel like an option. It feels so overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so when you have no outs and leaving isn't an option, leaving the religion doesn't feel like an option, and there is no option within the religion to fix it, that desperation can spiral. And I've seen that situation happen. It creates the perfect environment for hopelessness.
Yeah. And then there's also the side of whenever somebody does leave, if they were quote unquote a proper witness before they left, then they don't have anything to go to, because witnesses are so actively discouraged from having any friendships outside of the congregation that once you're disfellowshipped, you have nothing. Whenever I was disfellowshipped, I had to quit my job because my dad was my boss. I wasn't fired, but it was so awkward and so difficult to do that I had to quit and find something else. And so there's a feeling of hopelessness and loss whenever you're in. But if you are actually kicked out, especially if you did something to properly, quote unquote, merit being disfellowshipped, you're left in an absolute, just destitute state of absolute nothing. You have no friends, no job, you don't have any savings because you're always taught to be humble. And so there's just this overwhelming feeling of, I have nothing left. Why would I bother staying here? And that lends itself, I guarantee, to a lot of the, loss of life that we see from those who are depressed and have these issues.
I would say that a lot of what we've been talking about here has to do with fear. And when you, especially if you're born in, when your whole life has been the end is coming any second now, there's fireballs from the sky that's going to happen, and people are going to die, and you're going to lose people that and the people, your kids at school are all going to be gone, and it's all a lot of fear, and that stays with you. So even when you either you leave or you're disfellowshipped, you may not even believe it anymore, but it's sort of in the back of your head.
Yeah.
You get a particularly violent thunderstorm, and you're like,
yes. Thunderstorms have been a trigger of mine for about a decade. Absolutely.
And the social consequences for mistakes were so high that I've always had a lot of anxiety about making mistakes socially. That people, because there's so much gossip or there's loss of privileges, there's so much social consequences for mistakes in the organization that it can really mess up your your ability to just roll with punches or make mistakes.
It's sounding like you guys are talking about fear of failure.
Yeah.
Because that failure has such high consequences attached to it.
Yeah.
And that's definitely something I recognize that I gained from being raised in a Jehovah's Witness organization. And it's something that is taking me a long time even now to I have to consciously remind myself sometimes hey, it's okay if it doesn't work out. Sometimes good enough is okay, right? And sometimes in failure, we learn better things or better questions to ask or better ways to do things. But it, when we set ourselves up to do something and it doesn't go the way we had planned, that's always disappointing for sure. But when you've also attached such important things like your everlasting life or your family or maybe even your children's ability to be resurrected, these are huge and heavy consequences for just making it teeny tiny little tiny errors in our daily lives that you kind of wonder sometimes, are these really consequences that should be worth death? But that's the only thing that we're told. I mean, we don't really have any other way out. So it's a lot. It's a big burden.
I know when I was young, I remember thinking about little things in the Bible, the guy who reached his hand out to sturdy the tabernacle and then was instantly killed. Or actually, the one that really got me was I think it's in Genesis or Exodus, when the Israelites are in the wilderness and a bunch of them complain about how they had more variety of food in Egypt and they're sick of manna. And Jehovah literally sends in a bunch of meat. Quails rain from the sky. And then anyone who eats the meat, he kills. It's a very fun story that doesn't get talked about. I'll find the script. I'll find the verse after this. But
I remember it kind of.
Yeah, he gives everyone meat, and then he kills everyone who ate the meat. And I remember as a kid thinking, if God gave me a bunch of meat, I wouldn't have been the one complaining. But if he gave me the meat, I probably would have eaten it, and then I would have died. And I had a complex.
Why is God setting people up?
Yeah, so whenever I failed to give a good witness or say something maybe there's a birthday party and I didn't tell everybody why I wasn't celebrating, I would constantly have this complex that am I like the Israelites, that Moses didn't give enough credit to God and he punished him all over the water. There was all these Old Testament examples of people getting punished over the smallest, most ridiculous things that my childhood brain attached to. And so I constantly felt would Jehovah accept me if he would kill people for these minor things? I must have done something wrong. I'm never good enough. And I think that contributed a lot to my social anxiety and just generalized anxiety, because I'm constantly looking at myself and saying, I'm not good enough from the time I was a kid.
And we're taught we're not good enough. The society constantly reinforces the idea that we're not good enough. But my question is, and this is just a side note, why would a God make people that he knows is never going to be good enough for them and then just torture them by teasing them and promising them things and knowing that they will never be good enough? That just doesn't make any sense to me. I digress.
And it's only going to get worse too, because just about a month ago, our best friend Stephen Lett mentioned that babies are enemies of God.
Yep.
It'd be more apt to say, look at that little enemy of God, he says. And side note, Stephen Lett is the Seinfeld of the governing body. I've realized the way he talks reminds me a lot of Jerry Seinfeld, and that's ruined Seinfeld for me, but it's true. I'm sorry. But yeah, I was always told we're never good enough. We're always going to be raised that we just have to do everything we can and hope and pray that at Armageddon or on our deathbed that we've done enough for Jehovah to forgive us. And now we're ingraining that not only is it not good enough, but we are direct enemies of Jehovah from birth. Not children who need to be raised properly, like Jesus said, let the young people come to me. No, we're direct enemies from birth. And that just bothers me.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it seems like a logical conclusion of what they've always taught, but they've never gone out and stated it that way. And it's nice to see them saying the quiet part out loud, because we've always been viewed in that light that we're born not good enough and we're never good enough. But I feel like until now, no, they never would actually say that, because it's just so ridiculous to say out loud.
Yeah.
We're born with a debt, and we have to work our way out of this debt of worthlessness and not being good enough. And if you don't do it good enough, you're an enemy. It's adversarial. It's what is that when you have the either or fallacy? Like if you're not with us, you're against us. And that kind of attitude is it's very popular right now in a lot of Christian nationalism that's going around. People using the term the enemy, and oh shit, you could make anyone the enemy. I mean, anyone who doesn't believe in what you believe is the enemy all of a sudden. And if you've got enough righteousness behind what you think that you are doing what God wants you to do, it can immobilize people or do some pretty horrific things. But that's more murder instead of suicide.
Well, I think this last part is leading into what the effects of this feeling of worthlessness is, and also the things that the governing bodies say and how it affects people. You mentioned that Stephen Lett thing with babies being enemies of God. Is everybody aware of what happened recently in the news?
Yeah.
It's like Guadalajara or...
Yeah, I actually have...
somewhere in Mexico.
Okay, this was in Ecuador, actually.
Ecuador.
Oh, not Mexico.
Yeah,
Never mind. I take it back.
So this article is actually in Spanish, and I remember it's Ecuador because it's .ec, I think. So I had to translate it to English. But okay, so so reportedly, what had happened is this woman who is a Jehovah's Witness had heard this talk by Stephen Lett 3 days prior to stabbing to death her 45-day-old infant son. So she had some mental illness that she was dealing with. She was non-communicative, would communicate by sign language. But apparently she had thought she saw basically the devil in her son. And that's what happened. So there are some real consequences, lasting, horrible consequences that can come from just a stupid thing that one of the governing bodies members can say.
I believe I read in that article that they did get a statement from some representative of the JW.org, and they, of course, very quickly distanced themselves and had no problem saying that they support people, following the law and, that people should be punished for crimes that they commit. But they're never going to take any responsibility for the kind of emotional, what's the word, frenzy that they can put people in. And a lot of religions do this. It's not just Jehovah's Witnesses, but this is insidious. I mean, to say these kinds of things without recognizing that the people who might be in your organization are a very large spectrum of people with a large spectrum of mental issues, perhaps, you shouldn't say things like that. You just shouldn't, right? You have a responsibility. If you are the head of an entire religion, or one of the heads of an entire religion, and you have, I don't know how many people are in the JW organization at this point in time, but that's a lot of people to just make a statement out there without ever considering the consequences of what you're saying and how people might interpret it. And then to just completely step away from it and say, oh, I mean, that's not our problem. What this person did is not our problem. But really, this person probably only did it because of what they said.
Actually, my second screen is like way over there, so that's why I'm looking off to the side here. So I'll just read basically what we were talking about directly from the article, just for accuracy, and I have it here, so might as well. So Fernando Brito, national spokesman for the Jehovah's Witnesses, by email indicated that they are saddened by the death of the child. They do not have data on the case and assume that the authorities will continue with the investigation. Jehovah's Witnesses do not protect anyone guilty of a serious crime or the consequences of their actions. That's a lie.
Yeah.
Criminal conduct like this is condemned by the Bible, he stated.
Well,
It
what do
also
they
says-
consider serious crime? I
And
mean,
they said she was known as being emotionally stable, so I got that part wrong, and not known for having any mental illness. So
I
she
think
just
every article
flipped, I
that talks
guess.
about this, anyone guilty should be investigated. I think every single article out there should have a link to the ARC.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It should
Just
always be
across the
couched.
board, it should be widely known of, yeah, they say this, but look at this. This contradicts that statement right here.
what is
Yeah.
the ARC?
The ARC is the Australian Royal Commission, which is the investigation in Australia into the manipulation of children in ways that we can't mention or YouTube will shut us down.
Okay.
But yeah, they had a database of over 2,000 witnesses that were officially recognized as guilty of this crime. Not one of them had ever been reported to the police, and it was kept in a database that they finally were able to subpoena or whatever and get out. And now it's public knowledge. You just go to the ARC website. It's a government-hosted website. And, of course, all the witnesses say, oh, that's just apostate teachings, and that's all that. The governments are in on it. It's all a conspiracy. But no, it's not. And there's so much information to show the other, to show that it is factually problematic. And every single time somebody is like, the witnesses do not condone this or that, and they don't protect those who are guilty of crimes, I immediately want to just link them to that website and say, oh, yeah, look at this then.
Yeah, I feel like proper journalism on that would be to quote the witnesses saying we don't do that, and then have the second sentence be, however, they have been proven in court in Australia to have been keeping records about abusers from the police. So
Yeah, exactly.
and for those who haven't seen the Australian Royal Commission, they actually get one of the governing body members on the stand under oath, and it is damning. What I want to say is that this is actually not the first time I've heard a story like this. There was a case in 2018 in Michigan that was somewhat similar. It wasn't in direct response to something the governing body said, but a disfellowshipped Jehovah's Witness woman kills her whole family and states that it's basically because she believes that they will, if she kills them while they're faithful, they'll be resurrected.
Yeah. I kind of went down the rabbit hole in preparation for this. So you guys are saying something like, oh yeah, I know that one. Sorry.
Yeah. And that's actually something that's like logical in Jehovah's Witnesses teaching, right? Like if you die while faithful, you'll be resurrected. The longer you're alive, the higher chance you might screw up. And if you are disfellowshipped when you die, you're out. So in a way, it's almost logical within the framework of the teachings.
But not logical in the framework of, regular life.
Reality.
Reality, exactly. That's a better choice of words. It's too much sometimes,
Yeah, and I don't think that the governing body realizes the extent of their words. What actually hit me, and I think a lot of people will relate to this, but I was always in good standing, but for some reason I wasn't being appointed a ministerial servant. And I know now from people I've been able to talk to that it was one elder that was holding it up who just didn't like me, whereas all the other elders wanted me to be a ministerial servant. So whenever I'd ask, they'd all tell me I'm doing great, and they wouldn't be able to tell me what else I have to do. So I was always in this limbo of waiting to get appointed. And then there was the talk where Tony Morris says, if you're marrying a brother and he's 23 and he's not a servant, what is wrong with you? I don't know if you guys remember that. I think it was like 2014 or 15, but he gave this talk where he specifically said, sisters, if you're dating a brother and he is 23 and he has not been a ministerial servant, there is something wrong with him. And that was the most humiliating, talk. I was recently married at the time. And a lot of other people I've talked to had the exact same experience. In fact, Jake from Altworldly has talked about that. But it affects people's real life. If you were dating someone who wasn't a servant and was 24, and a governing body member says that, you'll probably drop them or pressure them. And lots of people experience pressure after that, or relationship issues and humiliation. And there's lots of little things like that where they'll just say something almost off the cuff, probably off the cuff, that really has an impact on people's lives because people hang off their every word.
Yeah, on the one hand, I agree with what you're saying about how they do say these things. Obviously, but the part that bothers me is that you're right that they don't see the impact of their words, and it bothers me that impact is directly in front of them, as evidenced by Stephen Lett's own niece who committed suicide because they were gay.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, like almost immediate family member, raised almost by Stephen Lett himself, was pressured into giving up this lifestyle, couldn't, and decided it was better for them just to, commit suicide rather than suffer anymore. And yet, within just months of that happening, Stephen Lett's out here going off on tangents, saying more stuff about, why it's so wrong to be gay. It almost feels like, and I'm going to preface what I'm about to say by saying this is my own personal feelings on the matter, and I'm not making a statement. I'm not, but it almost feels like he is saying, in effect, if I have to suffer the consequences of my words, so do you. And he's almost doubling down on it as some form of personal trauma lashing out, that sort of thing. He realized he fucked up. And instead of him admitting his own failures, he has to double down on it to try to vindicate himself in some way. Obviously, I can't say that that's exactly what's going on, but it sort of feels that way in my mind. And it's absolutely tragic that it's right in front of them and they don't see it.
Yeah, and I believe that scenario actually woke up some of his niece. So it tells you just how much of an impact it had on his family. But you just see, some of his family wake up and then he just doubles down and does it more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that interview with his niece. It was pretty tragic, the whole thing. She read, I believe she read a letter that he had written, that her brother had written.
Yeah,
and
I do remember that.
So we've covered a lot of different areas that make it, I think, apparent why the percentages are higher for Jehovah's Witnesses than the general public.
Yeah, so should we summarize that real quick? I know I missed the first couple, but having just a quick TLDR recap. The things I'm thinking of are the pressures, the telling you it's your fault, the way that you can be trapped and feel that there's no way out. What other recap reasons can you remember?
Mental health in general, depression, anxiety, feelings of hopelessness, like you said, just general worthlessness, being told that you're not good enough directly.
Shame towards therapy. Not only the not providing of resources, but the active discouragement of using the resources that should be available to you. In print, they technically say talk to a mental health professional, but in practice, whenever you actually reach out to the elders and say, hey, I want to get help, they just go and tell you you just don't have enough faith. That's a big one. Yeah.
So what would be everyone's advice to somebody who might find themselves in that desperate position?
Look at the bottom of the screen for one. If you need the numbers in the U.S. and Canada, they're right there. If not, we'll put a link in the in the description listing some other countries or a list of countries with their hotline numbers. For sure, reach out anyway. If you are suffering, it is okay to ask for help and get help. And if the people you ask for help shun you or try to dissuade you, then ask somebody else. Get that help anyway. You are worthy. You are enough. You are loved. We want you here with us. We do not want to see you go for any reason. And if those people who are surrounding you in your life and your loved ones are trying to dissuade you from doing that, find somebody who's going to give you the help that you deserve. You are worth that.
And
no matter
also,
how you're made to feel,
call on a good friend. Here's one now.
I can't even hear.
Oh,
I could add to that, in that death and killing yourself, dying is literally the last option that you have to choose to solve your solutions. And if you feel like that's the only option you have, it's probably not. And if you think you are not finding the answers or help where you're looking, try going outside of the organization first, for one, because there are a lot of resources out there, a lot of resources for a wide variety of different topics and different, issues that people are having. It is the last option that you can pick. And I don't think it should be something that you should be ashamed of. I think that it is something that we treat it as you should be ashamed that you're thinking this. And I don't mean we, but like just society as a whole doesn't want to talk about it. And the fact that on TikTok we have to say the word unalived because the word suicide gets like banned for some reason just blows my mind, because how are we going to talk about it? How are we going to normalize people coming forward and talking about their feelings and talking about their issues if we just ban the subject from being talked? And TikTok is a good example of it. I think the Jehovah's Witness organization is another good example of not really wanting to talk about it. It was mentioned earlier, sometimes they literally just pretend those people didn't exist if they do commit suicide in their organization. So that's not the only option out there. And there are a lot of different things to try. And I would highly recommend not only calling the number below if you're having any immediate and urgent, feelings, but also suicide can sometimes be something that is a long-term feeling that builds and builds, but it's also impulsive to some degree. Especially the younger you are, the more impulsive the decision can be. And that is a huge problem as well, because younger people especially might not have access to even more resources, right? Because maybe your parents are even the ones that are limiting your access to things. And I'm hoping that with the day and age of the internet and how much information is so readily available to everybody, that hopefully more and more young people can find their way out of these kinds of situations and get help. But you could probably reach out to literally any stranger. And if you talk to them, they would help you at least find someone who could help you if they couldn't help you themselves. So.
Also, on that note, there are apps that you can use and numbers that you can text. If you are like me in a situation where whenever you're growing up, you don't have a lot of privacy where you can talk even on the phone, there are numbers that you can text to reach out for help. And there are professional counselors and therapists out there who all they do with their entire life is text people back to make sure that they're okay and get them to the proper resources, links, whatever you need, it's there. So, we're not sponsored by any of those, so I'm not going to mention any of them by name. But one thing I'll mention also is Reddit and those texting apps. If you want to make private, throwaway accounts, as it were, so that they're not linked back to you, you can do that on a lot of those apps. and they won't be traced back to you or anything like that. You can go out there, be open, ask the questions that you need, and get help. And whenever people respond to you, listen to what they have to say. Some of it's going to come as a shock, especially if you were born and raised as a witness. You're going to hear some stuff that doesn't make sense. And it's going to be like, wait a second, this is contrary to everything that I know. Hear them out anyway. Let your defenses down. Hear what they have to say, and really take it in. And it can really, really help.
Hi, Ryan.
Well, hello there. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very late to the show. I stopped editing. I was working on an intro video and I stopped editing. I went to eat and I started watching Stranger Things and I was like,
Well, I was gonna be mad, but it was Stranger Things, so I guess I could forgive you.
as we'll
I am
forgive you.
so
You get a pass this
sorry.
time.
I am so
I
sorry.
was super late too, so thanks for making me look better.
Okay, yeah. It was all just to make me look better. You deserve it.
Well, don't feel
I
too
just-
bad because originally we were going to be 7, so
Oh, okay. So it
So,
whittled down.
you made it.
I know.
Yeah.
Or those other
Sometimes
two
it just
people are going
happens
to join
that
in
way.
right at the end.
Yeah, of course. Then they're going to make me look good.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry that I missed everything, but I hope that you guys enjoyed your chat and got to maybe dig into some stuff and start the channel off on a good foot with some info. Always love some info.
Yeah, we were just basically covering different aspects of why it's a challenge for Jehovah's Witnesses, specifically. As
When it
far
comes
as
to mental health.
yeah, as far as
Yeah.
social conditions and fear and not being good enough, things like that.
Oh yeah, that's like the typical JW mindset. At least it was for me. I don't know. That's how it seemed to
Yeah.
be for me. So yeah, I think that's great that you're like telling people how they can kind of get help on the sly if necessary, because you don't always have access because there's no privacy.
Mhm.
And if you don't have control of your internet because you're a child or whatnot, and your parents are controlling what you do and see, or at least they're watching what you do and see, it's difficult. You got to find ways to do the undercover stuff.
Public
Well,
libraries is another one that just came to mind. If you need to get some help,
Yeah.
go to a library or your school library if you're still in
Mhm.
school, and just ask somebody, even if you're in a situation where you can't, reach out yourself, ask somebody to do it on your behalf. But if you can go to a library, you can usually get access to those resources because they're not going to block, those types of resources from schools. At least not any school that's worth anything.
Yeah.
And if they are, then you have more questions to ask and whatever, but that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah.
But on the sly is important, especially being a younger person in the witnesses.
Mhm.
Sometimes you
Yeah.
got to do things you don't want to do, but it's important. And if you're struggling and you're watching this video, you've already done enough that reaching out is just one more step. Do it, please.
Yeah, if
It's
you're
hard
in
to
your
pretend that you
car
have to.
hiding out watching this video, then feel
Yeah.
free to contact us one way. We have our Discord that a bunch of us get together and talk and work towards a common goal and just share stories and
Mhm.
have a good time. And it's that support system that we all lost from
Exactly.
being out one way or the other.
Yeah. And I think
I would-
even I don't know about all of you, but I've even just been losing people just since kind of waking up, realizing like, oh, some of these people I don't know that I really want to be friends with. Sorry. Not
Yeah.
sorry. It's nice to find people who are like-minded.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think Discord is a fantastic resource. There's so many ways for people who are physically and mentally out to be able to communicate with each other that I would never have imagined existed when I was a PB.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, is it safe to say that of us here that we've at least had some sort of suicidal ideation at some point in our lives?
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
if you are having those sort of thoughts, just know that you're not the only one who's feeling that way and has felt that way. That other
Mhm.
people get it. That we are happy to talk to you. If not us, then a professional or another group of of friends that you can talk to that just, because what is therapy really? It's just talking it out, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to communicate your feelings, and you may feel like it's the end of the world and you don't have any options but to end it. But I know myself, I was at a dark point in my life to where I had a rope that was connected to my drop ceiling in my basement that was just up there for when I needed it.
Oh, wow.
And I'm glad it never got to that.
Thank God.
It was a rough time.
Thank
But
Jesus.
when you're in that mindset to where you're actually making a noose and putting it up there and for later, you're like, I don't know if I can handle life anymore. But then you come and you get through that, and you get to the other side of it, and you realize, my God, I'm so glad I didn't actually do that, because it got better. I didn't see it on this side of it. I didn't see it. I didn't think it could get any better, but it did. And sometimes you just need to talk to people.
Mm-hmm. It helps you through that. It can help keep you stable.
Yeah,
I think that's probably a pretty common feeling too, that feeling that it's terrible and it could never get better. That's a big, heavy feeling. And I think we can all probably relate to having that feeling, whether it was about suicidal ideation or just depression. Those feelings can just make it worse. And I've even had feelings where it's like, I know that the right thing to do isn't to commit suicide or to even just keep dwelling on these thoughts, but it's almost like something clicks over in your brain and you just can't stop thinking about it. Now it's almost like you want to keep thinking about something bad happening, or I'm just going to let it all fall apart. Cause it is a lot easier to let things fall apart and fall into chaos than it is to do the work and the effort to maintain it. But it's so rewarding when you can, and you often can't see beyond the hurdles, but it's like once you get past them and you take them in small increments, you don't have to look at it as, I have to be perfect. I have to solve all of these problems in order to get rid of this feeling. Sometimes it's just taking that one step. Sometimes it's just the first step. And then before you know it, you're walking and you're moving toward, and you might even pass that hurdle, and you didn't even realize it until you turned around to look behind you. And so sometimes we can get past these things on our own, but usually with help from other people, reaching out and getting help from people that you can trust and that you can care, that care about you, is always helpful.
Trust is a big thing. Trust is a huge thing
that
you never really learn. And I never really learned what trust was when it came to being a Jehovah's Witness. You can't trust anybody. Everybody's ready to turn you in.
Yeah.
Do something wrong. Don't slip up.
Which is why I would also advise people, it's nobody else's business, right? So if you need to go seek a therapist who's a secular therapist, or somebody who's, you're going to take some medication that a doctor prescribes to you that people are going to vilify you for it, don't tell them. They don't need to know. It's none of their business. You do what you need to do to get by and to get past those hurdles. Because once you're past it, you might even look back and be like, I can't believe I even cared what those people think. I can't believe I cared what that elder thought about me and what he said to me. That's just ridiculous.
Don't let an elder convince you that you shouldn't talk to a therapist, psychologist, or whatever.
God,
if you need it, you need it.
Yeah, it's a good thing. It's such a good thing. Therapy is such a good thing. Oh my God, it's such a good thing. I think I have a therapist right here, right now.
We were talking about this a little bit earlier, but whenever I was diagnosed with depression back in 2011, 2012, first thing I did, I went to the elders and said, hey, I've been diagnosed and I want to get therapy. And they're like, all right, cool. We're taking away all your privileges, though.
Oh.
So, even though on paper they technically say we support you and we want you to get the help that you need, in practice, they actively try to do the opposite. And they just try to blame you for saying, they told me I just don't have enough faith. I need to go on service more. I'm like, I'm working full time and I'm pioneering. I'm putting almost 70 hours a month in field service. I was almost special pioneering. and
my
yet they
God.
still said you just aren't. You don't have enough faith.
Oh,
Apparently
you
not
won't.
special enough. So
Yeah, exactly.
right. You're not a
Exactly.
special enough pioneer.
Special snowflakes need therapy. I wasn't quite.
You're
there
like an
yet, I
okay
guess.
pioneer, not a special
And
pioneer. Just like a
I want to add for anyone who might not be a witness who's listening to this. When we talk about taking away your privilege, it's not just like a demotion. It's not just that you're losing some responsibilities, but it is also a subconscious social signal that that you've done something wrong. When you have privileges and you lose them, people assume you did something wrong and they fill in the gaps. And because I just did my last. It's not out yet, but my next episode of Babylon the Great, my podcast, actually is specifically about this. That there are these built-in social controls, and you're expected to you're defined by your associations. So you want to associate only with other people who are in good standing. So once you lose privileges, other people who want to gain privileges may associate with you less. So it's not just losing some privileged position, but it could be losing friends. It could be losing invites. It could be people making assumptions about you just because you went to see a counselor. Now they think you're doing something wrong and they think you're out of favor with the elders and they don't want to spend time and get close to you.
After all, bad association spoils useful habits. They love to ingrain that one in you.
Yeah,
Once
'cause
you're marked, that's it.
yeah, because they may not really take notice of what you do in the congregation, but they after a while they kind of notice, I haven't seen this guy running the microphone in a while. He hasn't been sitting at the back door watching or counting people's attendance.
Heads.
He hadn't said a prayer in a while, and you become a social pariah.
Exactly.
My friend, like I had one of my best friends, her father had an issue in the hall, and because her father had an issue in the hall, my parents didn't want me, like my parents were restricting me from being able to go over to her house and spend the night because they thought that she was bad association because her father was bad association. So once you have that mark, any kind of mark on you or your family, everybody falls under that umbrella. Doesn't matter how you slice it. Everybody's getting a little bit of a slight light shun.
And as far as the marking talk, I've heard thoughts in that basically once you're marked, there's no like time period where that's up. So the only way to get out from under that is to reach for more privileges. So they go, oh, this guy is running the mic. He's okay.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Way back in the day, they used to, because I remember because it happened in my hall a couple of times. Obviously, if somebody is reinstated, they'll make an announcement about that.
Yeah.
But the not quite disfellowshipping was the public reproof.
Yeah.
And back in the day, I remember they would actually make a statement from the platform, brother or sister so-and-so is now under public reproof. They would officially, publicly mark you. Yeah. And that was basically a death knell. You might as well have been disfellowshipped because nobody's going to communicate with you. You technically were still allowed, but one thing I noticed that they stopped doing. Well, they still do that.
I still kept fucking.
But one thing I noticed they stopped doing, at least in my congregation, is they used to say so-and-so is no longer under public reproof. They would make it almost like a reinstatement announcement. But from what I understand, they've stopped doing that now. And so once you're marked for life. You just have to,
So
do you have more information on that?
Yeah, you're correct, except with reproof specifically. Reproof takes away a few things like your ability to publicly comment and publicly pray.
Yeah.
So once the reproof has ended, you can demonstrate that you're no longer under reproof by commenting again. But when it's a marking talk, you have no way of indicating it other than getting privileges.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
System. You got to know the system, man. Like there's a game you got to play in the system that you have to play. And if you're not on the in, like the elders, you don't know all the answers. You don't know how to avoid the loopholes. Yeah. And you're flailing around in that religion.
Yep.
It's wild.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, and to that point about the mark or reproof in that, you may just notice somebody who's just quiet who used to answer for a while, and you just don't really think too much of it until you see them one meeting where they're doing this like crazy. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
remember
think that
that.
adds to a.
I remember
Sorry.
that. No, I was just saying I remember that happened to me.
I think it also adds to a culture of like, you now have to comment a lot, because if you don't raise your hand, people will assume you're under reproof of some sort, because there is private reproof too. So
Yeah.
you're constantly having to be on this treadmill of doing things and raising your hand and commenting and reaching out for more privileges. Because if you ever lose a privilege, or if you ever stop commenting, it's assumed you did something wrong.
right.
Yeah.
And you're encouraged to look for those things too. I remember, talks from the governing body members actively saying, look at brother so and so or sister so and so in the congregation, and look for things that they should be doing.
Yes.
And are they actively commenting? Are they actively in field service? Are they reaching out for these extra responsibilities?
Yes.
If not, why not? If not, maybe there's a discussion you should have with yourself and prayerfully decide whether or not that's the kind of person you want to associate with.
And that is how people in power keep their positions in power, because they continuously have you infighting and always like have your guard up and your back up. And it's not, I'm trying to think of it. It's not apartheid, because that's terrible, but you know what I'm saying? There's some kind of system in there where you're looking and you're looking for certain things and you're judging based on those certain things.
Like McCarthyism or Red Scare or something, where everybody was calling everybody communist.
Yeah. I
just call them a communist, and there you go. Their lives ruined.
You might not be saying it, but in your head, you're like, bad association.
Well, I guess I'm gonna spoil my podcast, because I literally just wrote a whole thing on this. But
I read your mind.
About it. We kind of talked about this and like realized that there's kind of like 5 levels of like negativity in the organization, and basically your status is determined by who you associate with. So you don't want to associate with people of lower status. So you're always trying to kind of figure out their status. And so like the statuses you have, like at the bottom you have someone who's spiritually weak. So someone who's spiritually weak, you're perfectly fine being around them. You can be friends with them as long as you make it clear that you're trying to encourage them. So you're not going to want to be seen too much. You're not going to want to be seen one-on-one. You are not going to be their individual friend, but as a group, you will be their friend. So you will invite them to things, but you don't want to be seen as their close associate. Then as people get worse off, they become bad association. And when someone's bad association, you kind of push them away, and you will only like reach out to them at arm's length and try to maybe get them to come back to meetings and stuff like that. And then you've got someone who is marked, which marking just formalizes bad association. Bad association is kind of fuzzy, and it's up to you to determine. But when someone is marked, then they're officially bad association. And then, again, the only way to get out of that is to achieve these privileges. And then above that, you have someone who's publicly reproved, which means that they have clearly done something wrong and they're under punishment for it. And you don't want to associate with them. And then, of course, you've got disfellowshipped. And so you've got these stages, and you try to determine where people are at, because that tells you how close you want to be with them, because that affects your status. If someone is known to be spiritually weak, you don't want to be seen as their individual friend. You still will invite them to things, but you don't want to be their individual friend. You don't want to be seen as their buddy, because then you'll be spiritually weak. And so these systems are what keeps people trapped in the cycle, because you don't want to become the bad association. So you need to constantly be on that treadmill and be getting new privileges and be answering comments and constantly signaling people, I am not bad association. It's okay to hang out with me.
Right.
Even if it's all fake, 100%, they will keep up the charade, however you want to pronounce it, just to be that good association.
I'm smiling and giggling internally, because as I'm hearing you guys say all these things, I've been out for a very long time. I've been out like 18 years now. So a lot of memories are kind of like coming out over the years that I've clearly buried behind, and I'm realizing I played the game in my own kind of way, where I kind of stayed in the shadows. Like, I participated in the meeting, but only at book study, and I showed up to all the other ones. And so when anything did happen with me, nobody noticed anything different in my behavior or my ability to do anything, because I didn't really try very hard to participate. But I was there. I showed up, you know. And then I did talk to the elders one time about something that I thought would make me feel better if I confessed. It didn't. And they privately reproved me, and the only reason they didn't publicly reprove me was because nobody knew what I had done, and I didn't tell anybody. Yeah. And they even said, really? Not even so-and-so, your best friend, clearly, that we can tell you're friends with, you didn't tell this person? And I was just like, no, why would I tell her that? I was ashamed of it. And so that was the only reason why I didn't get publicly reproved, is because people didn't know anything about me, and because I just sort of lived on the outskirts.
Because it's all about visuals. It's all about visuals.
I didn't make them look bad is really all that it came down to. So,
and you mentioning that's a good point, because one of the big differences between being privately and publicly reproved across the board is who knows about it.
Right.
Have you done something that other people know about? Because the most important thing is protecting the image of the congregation, the image of the elder body. And if you've done something that anybody else knows about, their hands are tied, as it were. They have no choice but to make a public statement about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they formalized that appearance matters more than the crime.
Exactly.
Which all goes back to not fitting in. Feelings of worthlessness, feelings of burdening others, and not being accepted in society, all being things that loop you right back into that spiral of depression and suicidal ideation.
And you don't know who you are. You don't know who the F you are.
When you do something wrong, you start playing your own mental mind games of, okay, I fucked up. I know I fucked up, but if I admit it, I'm going to get in trouble. So maybe I should just start going out in service more and you start to discipline yourself almost, or not, but torture yourself would be a more apt way to put it. Maybe I can make it okay that I did this and not have to worry about losing everything that I have in my entire life if I just go out in service more and do all these things instead. And then the more you don't admit to it, because there's always periodic talks about if you've done something that you know is wrong, you need to admit it and confess it. Right. And then that guilt eats away at you. And then if you don't give in to the dark thoughts, eventually you give in, and then they have to decide whether you're worthy or not to stay in the congregation. So the whole system is just from the ground up built to beat you and pummel you into submission. And every single negative thing, it doesn't matter what it is. I looked at a dirty magazine at school one day because some kid brought it into class in 8th grade. And I might as well have, just shot my best friend in the arm. And it's ridiculous. So going right along with what you're saying, it's the whole situation's fucked up. And I cannot wait until more people start to realize it and start to wake up and publicly reprove the congregations.
And I actually believe that it says in the elders book somewhere that if an elder did something wrong many years ago, didn't tell anybody about it, and then was appointed an elder, and then it comes out privately, they don't have to punish him because him getting appointed, it's clear that he has God's favor now. And so that's even another thing that encourages you to just shut up about it.
Yep.
I did a little video on this. I had accidentally. Okay, so I purposely accidentally read my dad's, because he was a ministerial servant and he had the Shepherding the Flock book, and it was open, and I just happened to notice something about the whole, if nobody knows about it, keep your mouth shut. It didn't say that, obviously, keep your mouth, but if nobody knows and time had passed, then. So that's kind of how I felt about every and anything. My lips were freaking sealed, and it got me out of trouble because this guy that I really like thought I loved. Obviously, I was like 14. I didn't, but like we had made out, but he got caught because he was making out with like other girls and like a bunch of them, I think. And so thankfully, when I got asked about it, I was like, no. And because they had no proof and nobody else knew about it, it was just, what could they do? I was like, nope, never happened. Not me.
Didn't you say you were friends with him later in life too?
Oh yeah, we're still friends, and I still like. I would love to interview him, but I don't know if he ever would be down for it. But like, he's such a, and I felt bad for him because he was actually disfellowshipped, which now being through it myself. At the time, I was younger than him, and I hadn't been through it. But now being through it, I wonder how he dealt with it. And one of my best friends at the same time was disfellowshipped. It was really like two of my best friends gone, basically. That was really hard for me. So I don't even know how hard it must have been for them, because they were dating and now were they allowed to talk to each other? Not really, kind of. I guess they could, but anyhow, it's a whole thing. It's weird.
Have any of you guys read Jenny Bloom's blog post she made today? It's Bones and Bloom on Twitter.
Oh, I'll have to follow them. No, what's it about?
She's great. So Jenny made a post today about a journey from purity culture to destigmatizing sex. But there's a specific part in there that just hit me, that brought me back to some stuff. Not this specifically, but so she describes the situation where, like, if you're dating someone and maybe you sext them, or you make out a little too much, you haven't like necessarily broken a rule that will get you reproved or disfellowshipped or anything, but you're also in a situation where now it will hurt your reputation to the point that maybe you'll be seen as damaged goods. People, if so now, like, you're almost stuck in the relationship, because if you are dating someone and then push some lines and they feel bad about it and go and tell people or tell the elders later, there's almost a mutually assured destruction there where now your reputation is ruined. So it creates a guilt about ever leaving the relationship. And she wrote a bit on that, and that was just a bit of a, like, something I had never put into words, but I kind of subconsciously was very aware of.
That's interesting.
What did you say the name was again? Sorry, I tried to look them up and I couldn't.
On Twitter,
There's a link in chat here for us.
It's a pretty long blog post, though. But definitely read that later. And she posted it on Twitter. I'll post it on Twitter account. She's
like, I can put this into the show notes, anything that's listed here.
Okay.
For future reference, so if anybody wants to check them out. Any of the articles that we looked at too. So
I was listening to you guys talk about that, and I was recognizing that those privileges and having that to strive for, that you should have goals to have privileges, and how easily those things can be taken away, and how much that can really affect your social status, and how that can also affect some already pre-existing depression, and that could really push it forward. And one of the things I recognize is very quickly as a youth growing up, it was pretty obvious to me that it was very sexist to me, that I could not see any reason why any woman was not also equally capable to serve the religion and everyone in the congregation, and to just hold a microphone. Like, I wanted to work the sound system. I thought that was awesome. And it was really frustrating for me that there was no good reason that I couldn't do it, other than I just didn't have the right penis.
Well, I mean,
you had the wrong penis,
unfortunately. I had the wrong penis. But I also didn't care about that stuff. I didn't care about it. I didn't look at any person as something that I only wanted to be friends with people who were ministerial servants, or I only wanted to interact or be with somebody who was a ministerial servant. I actually just didn't care about it. I ended up just taking a different perspective of just being like, well, I think the whole thing's stupid. So if I think about it, I'm just going to get mad. So I'll just not care about it. And so I never learned the process that men had to go through in order to be ministerial servants or elders or any of that stuff. I didn't care about any of it because to me, I wasn't allowed to participate in it. So I had no interest in it. But I definitely recognize that that's a hardship that I didn't specifically have to experience.
But in line with the whole discussion, that could be something that someone has had trouble with. And a lot of this stuff is cumulative.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily one thing that's bothering you, but it might be this and that and the other. And it's just enough to push you over the edge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I talk about this specifically with my wife quite a bit, actually. Sorry, you sound like you could be quoting her. And
I think we would get along.
Jane holds up and
I
notes.
love her.
Got him.
I love her. She's amazing.
Yeah, like we had these same conversations where she didn't really like some of the fine details and didn't like recognize some of the social rules she was supposed to be following. And sometimes she would ask me, and like I would try to explain it, and I'd give the line I'm supposed to, but also like her questioning of it like earnestly made me realize how dumb some of it was. So I'd like give her the witness answer, but I'd also be like, oh, I don't like my answer. But one thing I think about a lot now is that like if you are a man in the organization, there's a lot put on you of things you have to do, responsibilities, but you have an outlet for ambition. If you have ambition as a man, you're told you can climb this ladder, you can do these things. And if you are a woman, they beat that ambition out of you. You have nothing you can aspire to except to be a circuit overseer's wife. Or maybe do marry an elder and do the work for him and don't tell anybody. And I
go straight for your husband.
Yeah, like that's the most you can get as a woman. And so like I can't help but wonder like how that affects the psychology of people who have been in it a long time, because at least men are their ambition is redirected. Like all humans have, or most humans have ambition. We want to accomplish and achieve things. And so for the men, like they're redirecting us into, instead of like a career or something that satisfies us, they redirect us into these privileges. But for women, they just beat it out of you. And I can't help but wonder like how that just affects people's psychology. And like maybe that's the reason that men leave the organization at a higher rate than women, just because they're made to feel that they can be something and women aren't. I don't know.
It's a pressure, right?
Yeah. Like at least they tell men that they can accomplish something, and they don't tell that to women, and that's sad and horrible.
The only thing you can be is a supportive wife. It's literally what they beat into the woman is just be submissive, be supportive, so that way he can do what he needs to do when it comes to his responsibilities.
I never wanted to be a J-Dub wife. I just didn't. I didn't want to be a wife of anyone.
Thank God
in the
I'm
Jehovah's
not.
Witness organization.
I might still be in it. I might still be in it had I. Thank you.
My wife said the same thing, that she might still be in it if she'd been allowed to pursue privileges. And actually, her sister, who is still in it, moved to a really rural hall that had so few male publishers that she was allowed to do the sound. And she's still in it.
I feel like we have a sneak preview for what may be next recordings topic du jour.
Oh, what is it?
Misogyny.
Ooh,
yeah, a bunch of us can talk about your experience.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is we're going to get a bunch of the men together to.
Oh no!
Exactly.
Damn it, Sam.
Oh dear. Okay, well, I think we have reached a natural conclusion to the topic of mental health with the witnesses. So I think we've closing thought over and over again now, so maybe we'll just go ahead and
Be done.
Unceremoniously cut it off.
bye. David Black Sopranos episode. No, but we'll conclude with the song number and all that. So I want to thank you all for
Concluding
joining.
prayer.
We took it in stages too, so that was kind of nice.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Appreciate it.
Appreciate that.
Yeah,
so
thank you so much for the invite.
all.
So thank you for whoever is watching this when it gets released.
Sorry, I
We'll
was
try and
late.
do these on the regular as much as we can, and we hope that we'll have more and more people watching us, so we can hopefully positively affect anybody who needs it. Anybody else want to say something? I feel like I'm floundering.
If there's any questions, if you're out there watching and you have any questions that you'd like, former cult members, whether it's Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, any other group, to answer, feel free to ask in the comments, or hop on over to the Discord. We'll have a link in the description, and hop on over and just ask us. But we have ideas for what we want to talk about, obviously, but what questions would you like to have answered? That's a big one that I was curious about. And we would love to be able to have more conversations about that. So feel free, please reach out. Don't hold back.
So we
And
can
if you
have
have-
a new segment called Questions from Reader.
Well, there you go.
Reader.
Questions from viewers, I guess.
We'll put it in a one-page article on the back of a magazine every 6 months or so.
So
There you
wait. Are you saying we can just start making them up then? We've already
Yeah.
got a question from a reader, guys. Guess what? We've already got one.
Nice.
Thank you.
And guess what? It's a question we know the answer to. Who knew?
Interesting.
Ryan's going to be like, the question is, do you sell your sewing stuff?
Michael from San Francisco wrote in, and he's asked,
Dear Abby,
Dear Abby.
what I would love is this. I don't know who, how, when, but I would love to have like segments that are just almost like news, but just like updates on what's going on inside different cults. Maybe when it comes to what's going on in the news, like because I feel like I just had a friend, well, Josh, Gene, he just told me, he was like, you really seem to know, like you have like your finger in the heartbeat of like what's going on with the activism when it comes to like these cults. And that was like a really big compliment to me because I didn't know that, but I guess maybe I do. I guess maybe we all do. So I think this would be an excellent time to maybe start doing just like a news report, almost like they do, and just, hey, this is what's happening in the Mormons, this is what's happening in the Amish, news, court case, whatever it might be. Okay. So
You
Hold
can,
that thought for 1 second.
You can call it Watching the World.
Okay.
ooh.
World watching you. Okay, everybody take 5 seconds to do the wave goodbye, and we'll say goodbye, and then we can continue on, because then I can cut that off for the recording.
I don't know how to do this.
Thanks for watching, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. I'll be here next time.
see you later, guys.
Woohoo!
Okay, all right, good.
It's about the things that we overcome. Tomorrow's a new day. I will find a way. What if this was your destiny? All that pain just so you could see everything you need is inside you.